I sat in my corner office, the city sprawling beneath me like a living painting, and traced the delicate threads of my silk blouse with my fingertips. The morning sun glinted off the chrome of my coffee mug, and for a fleeting second, everything felt perfect. Almost like my life was the polished version of a dream I had refused to let go of. But then my phone buzzed, a message from a number I hadn't saved. Emily. Hannah. Mom, and I want to see you today. Graduation talk. My chest tightened, a reflex I hadn't felt in years. I hadn't thought about that day in forever. The white columns of the auditorium, the feel of my cap slipping over my hair, the proud smile I'd imagined on my mother's face that never came, and the words that had cut deeper than any blade. You're not pretty enough. I let out a quiet, ironic laugh. Funny, isn't it? How people expect the same person to stay the same forever. I had spent years hiding the bruises they didn't even know they left. The truth? I had grown stronger, sharper, and yes, successful beyond what they could imagine. But part of me, a stubborn, fragile part, wondered if I could stand seeing them again. The sunlight shifted, painting the office in gold. I inhaled, smelled the coffee, felt the smooth leather of my chair beneath me, and decided, today, I wouldn't just face them. I would own every inch of the life they tried to steal from me. I remember that day as if it were etched in my bones. Graduation morning. My gown felt heavy and stiff, the mortarboard sliding slightly over my hair as I twisted it nervously. I had spent weeks imagining the applause, the proud smiles, the hug from my mother. But reality hit before the music even started. Wow, Hannah, you really think wearing that will make anyone notice you? My sister's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass. I froze, clutching the small gold bracelet my grandmother had given me the night before, a delicate charm with a tiny engraving, "Strength grows from pain." It had been her gift for courage, though I wasn't sure I believed it at the time. My mother didn't even look at me. Her eyes, cold and calculating, swept past like I was invisible. Hannah, you're really just not pretty enough to stand out. Maybe try harder next year. The words landed like bricks. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the step, and I nearly fell. No one reached for me. I was alone, literally and emotionally. The auditorium smelled of polished wood and perfume, the chatter of classmates like a distant echo, and I felt myself shrink, small and inconsequential. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I held the bracelet tight, squeezing it until my knuckles whitened. My throat was tight, my hands shook, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd ever be enough for the people who were supposed to love me most. Then I remembered my grandmother's words, "Strength grows from pain." And I made a choice. I wouldn't stay trapped in their definition of me. I wouldn't beg for approval or pretend their words didn't wow me. I would leave, quietly, and find a place where my worth wasn't dictated by someone else's shallow standards. I took a deep breath, smoothed the gown over my shoulders, and walked out of that hall, my heart pounding, every step a silent vow. I will rise. I will survive. And someday, I will show them who I truly am. I left the auditorium that day with nothing but the gold bracelet and a suitcase full of dreams no one believed in. The first months were brutal. I worked jobs that left me bone-tired. Waitressing until midnight, tutoring kids who didn't listen, cleaning offices with my hands raw from chemicals. Every evening, I sank into the worn armchair in my tiny apartment, tracing the bracelet and whispering the words my grandmother had given me. Strength grows from pain. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd ever escape the shadow of their rejection. But then I met Mrs. Lorraine Hayes, a retired editor who had a soft spot for struggling young women. She saw something in me I hadn't dared to admit existed: talent, resilience, and a fire she called potential. Under her guidance, I learned to write, to pitch, to negotiate. Every article I submitted, every small client I landed, felt like a tiny victory, proof that I could create a life of my own, far from the judgment I'd left behind. I remember the first time I got a paycheck for my writing, my hands shook as I held it. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. And I kept it a secret. My mother and sister didn't need to know. I would let them assume I was struggling, maybe even failing. I needed the world to see my rise on my own terms, not theirs. Slowly, the wins started piling up. My articles were published in small journals, then bigger ones. I learned to balance deadlines, client calls, and the lonely grind of self-doubt. Every success, every compliment from someone who truly understood my worth, added layers to the woman I was becoming. Even when my hands shook from exhaustion, when I wanted to give up, I held the bracelet tightly and remembered that day in the auditorium. I wasn't the girl who had fallen through the cracks of her mother's expectations. I was someone stronger now, someone who could bend the world to her own terms. Years later, I had built a career no one expected. I ran a boutique media consultancy, a team of brilliant people who trusted me, who respected me. The apartment was now an elegant loft, lined with books and subtle art pieces, a quiet testament to the life I had fought to create. And every morning, as I sipped my coffee and glanced at the city below, I let myself smile quietly. I had risen, yes, but secretly, quietly, fiercely, in a way only I knew. And the thought of seeing my mother and sister again, it no longer frightened me. It thrilled me. Because the girl they left behind, she no longer existed. The knock on my office door echoed through the loft-like space. I looked up from my desk, the city sprawling beneath my floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a heartbeat, I felt a thrill I hadn't expected. My mother and sister stood there, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed.
Mom.
Claire, I said evenly, letting my voice carry the calm of someone fully in control. My mother's eyes widened, and my sister's mouth parted slightly, caught between smugness and confusion. They stepped inside, cautiously, as if stepping into a world they weren't invited to. They took in the space slowly. The rich, dark wood of my desk, the subtle abstract art on the walls, the awards lining the shelves, each a silent testament to the years they never believed in me. A soft rug cushioned their steps. The scent of fresh coffee filled the room. I let them look, let the silence stretch, let them wonder if this was just some trick, some illusion. "I guess you're doing well?" Claire finally said, her voice hesitant, testing, unsure. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had endured everything and emerged stronger. Doing well doesn't even begin to cover it. I rose from my chair and walked to the shelf, picking up a small, framed article. It was my first feature in a major magazine, my name in bold letters, my byline clear. "This is me," I said softly, letting the words hang. "I run my own consultancy now. I have clients worldwide, a team I lead, and a net worth that allows me to live without anyone's approval but my own." Their faces shifted, Mom's mouth tight, eyes narrowing, a flicker of shame. Claire's jaw slackened, disbelief evident. They had expected struggle, maybe humiliation, certainly weakness. But this was a revelation. I let them absorb the truth fully. Let the silence sit heavy. Then I spoke again. "Do you remember graduation day? When I sat alone, and you told me I wasn't pretty enough?" I was crushed. I was crippled by your words, literally and emotionally. And yet, here I am. I held up the gold bracelet, the one my grandmother gave me. "This is the only thing that kept me from believing your judgment defined me. This and the people who actually believed in me when you didn't." Tears glimmered in Claire's eyes. My mother's lips trembled. And I realized for the first time that the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the child anymore. I wasn't the powerless girl. I was the woman who decided the terms now. I stepped back to my desk, letting the light fall across my features, steady and unyielding. "I didn't just survive your cruelty.
I thrived.
And now, I decide what happens next." The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. And for the first time in my life, I saw them exactly as they were, flawed, human, and suddenly powerless in the face of someone they had tried to diminish. I leaned back in my chair, watching my mother and sister shift uncomfortably. The room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, a stark contrast to the tension hanging in the air. This was the moment I had imagined for years. Not to humiliate, but to reclaim control. Before we go any further, I said, my voice calm but firm, there are a few things that need to be understood. Claire opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. Listen first. Speak later. My mother, I began, you need to stop measuring everyone's worth by appearances. You've spent your life tearing others down to make yourself feel bigger. If you want any relationship with me, you will start by acknowledging your own insecurities, by apologizing for the years you belittled me, and by committing to respect boundaries. My mother's eyes watered, but I didn't soften. Actions matter, not excuses. Then I turned to Claire. You are smart, capable, and talented in your own right, but you've spent years trying to compete with me instead of discovering your own path. If you want to be part of my life, you will stop chasing validation by undermining others. Pursue your dreams. Take responsibility. Stop letting jealousy dictate your choices. I paused, letting each word sink in. And both of you need to understand one more thing. I am not here to repair the damage you caused. I am here to define my life, my success, and my relationships on my terms. Any connection with me must be based on mutual respect and honesty, or there will be none. Silence fell over the room. I could see the shame in my mother's posture, the uncertainty in Claire's eyes. But I also sensed something else, a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could learn, grow, and change. I walked to the window, the city lights reflecting in the glass. I'm not angry anymore. I've forgiven myself for being crushed by your words. But forgiveness does not mean returning to old patterns. It means setting new rules, for everyone's sake. Turning back, I added quietly, I care about you both, but I care about me more. That's the only way any of this will work. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Compassion tempered with steel. I was no longer the powerless girl left alone on graduation day. I was the woman who had rebuilt herself from the ground up. And now, for the first time, I could decide what kind of family I wanted and what kind of people deserved to be in my life. They nodded slowly, not fully understanding yet, but listening. And that was enough. For the first time, I felt truly untouchable, not because I was wealthy or successful, but because I was finally free. Weeks passed, and little by little, change began to ripple through my family. Claire started taking classes she had always dreamed of, but never dared to pursue. She sent me photos of her paintings, tentative at first, then bolder, more confident. My mother, after long, quiet evenings of reflection, began volunteering at a local shelter, learning to channel her energy into helping rather than judging. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was progress, and I saw in their eyes a glimmer of respect I had never received before. I sat in my office one evening, the city lights stretching endlessly outside my window. The gold bracelet on my wrist caught the glow, and I traced it absent-mindedly. That small piece of metal, given to me years ago by my grandmother, had carried me through the darkest days. It had reminded me that strength grows from pain, and that the girl left alone on graduation day could choose her own destiny. I realized, in that quiet moment, that the wounds of the past no longer had power over me. I had built a life defined not by their opinions, but by my own resilience, ambition, and integrity. I had forgiven, not because it was easy, but because holding on to bitterness would have chained me to the girl I no longer was. And yet, forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant embracing the lessons those scars had taught me. Every challenge, every insult, every lonely step I had taken had forged a woman capable of grace and strength in equal measure. I looked at the bracelet one last time and whispered, almost to myself, you believed in me before anyone else did. And I will never forget that. I stood and walked to the window, letting the breeze touch my face. The city below felt alive, full of possibility, and so did I. The girl who had been crippled, abandoned, and dismissed had risen, not just to survive, but to thrive. And as I watched the sun set over the skyline, I whispered to the reflection in the glass, my voice steady and calm. On the day they left me broken, they gave me the wings to rise. And I'll never let anyone clip them again.